I was reading the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and in the first few chapters he talks about this example of how your attitude towards the world or your response towards the world shapes the world itself. And it was a little story. There was a man, it was Stephen Covey from what I remember. He was on a bus and he was sitting on the bus, and it was like Sunday morning and it was quite relaxed. Everyone was on the bus and the bus was going along. People were quite relaxed, maybe having very small conversations, and it was quite relaxing. All of a sudden a man gets on the bus with 2 children. The man happens to sit next to Stephen Covey, and the children end up being quite riotous. They start running up and down the bus, making a lot of noise, disturbing people's newspaper reading, and you can see people getting quite irate and people getting a bit annoyed. So Stephen Covey obviously starts getting a bit annoyed and a bit irate, and he's feeling like, okay, I should probably speak to this gentleman and just say, look, sort your kids out a little bit. So he turns around to this gentleman who's just come on the bus with the 2 kids, and he's like, sir, are you okay? Just trying to be polite. And the man turns around and says, he was in a deep slumber, like in his own kind of thoughts, and he turns around and he goes, oh, I'm really sorry, my wife's just passed away and I don't know how to tell the children. Now you can imagine in that moment, what Stephen Covey talks about, he had a paradigm shift. The way he saw that situation in that scenario totally changed, totally and utterly changed. No longer was it irritation, but it was just compassion, and it was love, and it was empathy for that man. My God, he's just been through that situation. Now, many times this happens in our own lives. There will be a situation, there will be a scenario, and we will have that instant gut reaction. Standard, it's what all of us do, I do it all the time. But if you just peel back the layers slightly of that situation, you may end up seeing it from a very different perspective. Classic example is I end up suffering a lot from road rage. Well, I certainly used to, I still do to an extent. And I get very annoyed and frustrated if there's a driver that does something very silly in front of me, or maybe drives very slowly, unnecessarily. It gets to me. And sometimes I end up expressing that anger and frustration. However, whenever I'm a little bit more conscious or mindful, I'll think to myself, wait up. So maybe that person just cut me up, for example, on the road. But what if that person was rushing because they just had a phone call to say their mother was about to die? Wouldn't I be looking at that scenario in a very different way? Or maybe that person has their wife and she's about to give birth and they're rushing to the hospital, etc., etc. If we don't know all the facts, it's very difficult to know the full story and then be able to give the right kind of reasoning. Yet we all react, yet we all judge. It's a normal human thing. And part of that is to do with the way we see the world, the lenses, the glasses the lens that we perceive the world by. Now, the world is the world. A scenario is a scenario. Someone's cut me up, that's a scenario. I can't change that. That situation is what it is. However, the way I look at that situation can change. I can look at it from many different perspectives. Now, if I've trained myself to have a more optimistic outlook on life, for example, and I try and dwell in optimism more so, then in that moment when that person cuts me up, my mindset might not go straight to the reactive, how dare they, but it may switch to something a little bit more optimistic, as I explained, maybe they're rushing ahead, etc. That's just one example. I get fired from work, me and my partner have an argument, many different examples where this kind of thinking can happen. Or if I tend to be quite reactive, or if I tend to have a mindset that's quite negative, tends to be quite berating, tends to dwell in not good things, then sometimes what happens is a scenario happens and our mind switches straight to the negative talk. How dare they? How could they? It's their fault. That type of language. And it's a process to realize that that's something we can actually change. And it's to do with how we see the world, the way we perceive the world. And it's a case of changing our inner dialogue. So we talk to ourselves, we're always talking to ourselves. That's just a consistent thing. It's not kooky. There's always a voice going on inside of our heads. And if we end up changing that voice to not be so negative and not be so berating, but just be a little bit more just seeing the scenario for what it is. It's not about putting a positive spin necessarily. Just seeing the scenario for what it is. Someone cuts me up, someone's cut me up. It's not then the reaction that goes with it, whether it be positive or negative. If you can just train yourself just to see things as they are, that's one huge step towards maybe not dwelling straight in that reactive way or dwelling straight in that negative way sometimes, because we get caught up in this negativity at times.